If a verb uses motion, use sein in the perfect. If a verb does not show motion, use haben in the perfect. So let me get this straight. If I'm playing soccer, I'm clearly like moving around, I'm kicking a ball, running from side to side on the field. All of that means I should use sein. Right, Herr Lehrer? No. Playing is a non-motion verb. Insert convoluted explanation as to why this could possibly be. But when I'm riding my bicycle, I'm moving and then I need to use sein. Right, Herr Lehrer? Maybe. You say, ich bin mit dem Fahrrad gefahren, but ich habe das Fahrrad gefahren. I would love to explain why, but it just is that way. It's just one of those things that you gotta get used to in German. No, it isn't! Your German teacher is great, probably one of your favorite teachers of all time. They taught you a lot of cool things about the German language, but they aren't always right. This causes you to become confused and mess up things that you otherwise wouldn't have messed up. Today, I'll explain to you how your German teacher taught you the perfect tense incorrectly and what the real explanation is. Almost everyone who has ever had to learn the perfect tense or the present perfect tense or the spoken past or whatever it is that your German teacher called it has probably been told that you use sein and a past participle when the verb is a motion verb and haben with a past participle when it is not a motion verb. For example, ich bin mit dem Bus nach Chicago gefahren. I drove by bus to Chicago. We use bin, a form of the verb sein, with the past participle gefahren because the act of driving from one place to another includes motion. Then, if we have the sentence like, ich habe Pizza in Chicago gegessen. I ate pizza in Chicago. We used habe, a form of the verb haben, with the past participle gegessen because the act of eating does not make you go from one place to another, which means there is no motion involved. Well, spoiler alert, they're wrong, or at the very least inaccurate. Take these two examples. Ich habe das Auto nach Chicago gefahren. I drove the car to Chicago. In the previous example, the verb fahren was a motion verb, which is why we use sein. So how did the verb suddenly change from a motion verb to a non-motion verb while still having the same meaning of to drive? It didn't! What about this one? Ich bin in Chicago geblieben. I stayed in Chicago. How is the verb bleiben, which means to remain or stay, the very definition of a non-motion verb, a motion verb that somehow requires sein in the perfect? It isn't! Your German teacher probably wrote this off as an exception to their rule of motion verb versus non-motion verb. But it isn't an exception to the rule, it follows the rule perfectly, but your teacher is using the wrong rule. Okay, Herr Smarty Pants, what is the rule then? While motion verb versus non-motion verb is a good rule of thumb, it isn't a good rule of grammar, as it isn't accurate and it causes students to have trouble when it comes to verbs and verb uses that don't fit into this paradigm. The real rule requires you to understand two grammatical terms: transitive verb and intransitive verb. A transitive verb is a verb that requires or very often takes a direct object. It's a verb whose action is applied to an object or person. This includes verbs like to play. You can say, ich habe gespielt, I played, and not have an object, but ich habe Schach gespielt, I played chess, is also possible. If the default version of a verb requires an object, or the verb usually is verbing some object or acting upon some object, it's a transitive verb. These verbs require haben in the perfect in German. An intransitive verb is either a verb that can't take a direct object or one whose default version does not require a direct object. These verbs require sein in the perfect tense. While a lot of these verbs are motion verbs, the idea of motion is too vague and inaccurate of a description to say what exactly is happening. An intransitive verb can't act upon something, it can only act. Let's look back at the examples from before. Ich bin mit dem Bus nach Chicago gefahren. I drove by bus to Chicago. In this sentence, the verb fahren does not have a direct object. The mode of transportation is contained within the prepositional phrase mit dem Bus. Therefore, it's not being directly acted upon by the subject. This version is an intransitive verb. Most of the time, this is how fahren is used, which is why most textbooks and teachers tell their students that fahren requires sein in the perfect. The problem is that you can drive something. That's exactly what happened in our second example. Ich habe das Auto nach Chicago gefahren. I drove the car to Chicago. The car is the direct object of the sentence. It's the thing being driven. It is directly acted upon by the subject, ich. This means that fahren in this sentence is being used as a transitive verb. It has a direct object. That's why we use haben in this sentence. Ich bin in Chicago geblieben. I stayed in Chicago. The verb bleiben cannot have a direct object. But something can stay something. I'm still the same man I once was. I remained the same man. Ha! I showed you, Herr Smarty Pants. Sorry, that's not a direct object. That's a predicate nominative. This means that you use a nominative case thing in the part of the sentence after the verb. Essentially, it's used when you can put an equal sign where the verb is. In your example, if I put an equal sign where the verb remained was, the sentence means the exact same thing. I equal the same man. This means we do not have an object that is being acted upon, but rather a restating of the subject after the verb. Here's an example in German. Die Antwort ist ein Rätsel geblieben. The answer remained a puzzle or mystery. Both the answer and a mystery are the same thing, and one is not acting upon the other. Therefore, both are used in the nominative case. This means that bleiben is still being used as an intransitive verb, which will require sein in the perfect tense. The rule boils down to this. Is there a direct object, or is a direct object more often than not used with this verb? If yes, use haben. If no, use sein. The direct object almost always answers the question, what? Let's take a look at a few more examples to drive this home. Ich bin mit dem Flugzeug geflogen. I flew by plane. No direct object, intransitive verb, requires sein. What did you fly? Nothing. The plane flew, and I went along. I didn't fly anything. Ich habe das Flugzeug geflogen. I flew the plane on my own. Direct object, transitive verb, requires haben. What did you fly? The plane. The plane flew because I made it do so. I flew the plane. The plane is my direct object. Ich habe mich hingesetzt. I sat myself down. Direct object, transitive verb, requires haben. The reflexive pronoun mich is the direct object of that sentence. What did I set down? Myself. Ich bin aufgestanden. I stood up. No direct object, intransitive verb, requires sein. What did you stand up? Nothing. I am acting, but I'm not acting upon something or someone. There is no direct object. Do you get it now? Do you have a better grasp of the sein versus haben dilemma? Did I just blow your mind? Are you going to show this to your German teacher and be like, I told you there had to be a better explanation than just, it is that way? I bet if you do, your German teacher is going to tell you that they knew this all along, but they didn't want to confuse you. I knew that all along. I just didn't want to confuse you. What other lies have they told you? Today we are learning about Konjunktiv 2. Konjunktiv 2 is the subjunctive mood in German and is used to express wishes and possibilities. Want more about transitive and intransitive verbs? Check out this video. Want more about the perfect tense? Click over there. Want to be awesome like these people up here? Become a channel member via the join button under this video or join me on Patreon via the link in the description. Cheers!